In this video, we'll discuss how Cillian Murphy's face points to Stoicism being a favorable rhythm for him, as well as something called direct peach luck that his face carries. Enjoy. Welcome back. Today for our face reading, we're looking at Cillian Murphy, who's a very famous Hollywood actor. I'm sure many of you know him. So if you are new to my channel, as I always say, please go up to my 5-minute crash course face reading video. If you are a first-time viewer watching a face reading, it's very, very important that you go watch that so you have an understanding. There's some terms and terminology that I will use in this face reading that are very relevant, but if you don't know what they mean, you don't know the definitions, and you don't have the context for how a face reading works, go up there and watch this. So, Cillian Murphy, when I was compiling photos of him, I was drawn to his bone structure. That's one of the dominant things that leaps out first. So when we see a big dominant bone structure on a person, and the bone structure is very prominent on the face, this is an indicator of Jing. So Jing is one of the 3 treasures in Chinese medicine: Jing, Qi, and Shen. Jing is, if you think of it like a pyramid, Jing is at the bottom of the pyramid, Qi is the next level up, and then Shen is above it. The other way to think about it is a kerosene lantern, where the kerosene fluid at the bottom of the lantern would be the Jing, the fire or the flame would be the Qi, and then the light emitted into the room, the immaterial part that flickers and lights the entire room, would be the Shen or the spirit. So it's said if you guard these 3 things well, this is what ensures a life of longevity, health, and emotional resiliency. When we see big dominant bone structure, this means a surplus of Jing. This means that the genetic constitution of the person is usually pretty robust. So we're going to talk about those themes, what those mean usually when we see bone structure like this, some of the elemental breakdowns that I saw in his face, and then a type of luck that he carries in his face. There are 5 types. We're not going to talk about all of them in this video, but he carries a specific type. So let's dive into bone structure first and foremost. So when we see a bone structure like this, he's got these big dominant cheekbones. So when we think about cheekbones, there's a couple ways to think about this. One is just how much they protrude, okay, in relation to the face. Some people's are very soft and kind of small. Some people's cheekbones really stick out. The more they stick out and the more we see this happening, where the bone structure, where those cheekbones are pulling out, this is a metal feature. The metal relates to lung function, but metal also relates to space. It's the space around us. So people who have big dominant bone structure, big cheekbones, one is a couple different ways to think about space. One is cleanliness of space, tending to the space around them in terms of organizing their space, crafting their space. The space around people like this, when they have these big dominant features, it behooves them to pay attention to this a bit more than the average person. The other thing that we see is, because this is a mountain feature, this is also a dominance feature. So it doesn't mean that if someone has big cheekbones that they are inherently across the board dominant in every situation that they're in. What it points to is these dominant threads, though, which means people that have these larger cheekbones can definitely be put into positions where they're a bit bossy, and it kind of works for them, where they are the ones delegating, they're the ones telling people what to do. They're the front runner or the spearhead of an organization. They do very well that way. So when we see these big dominant bone structure too, I find that a lot of this metal features, he's got a strong metal element in his face too. He's got some big open broad spaces. This is very characteristic of the metal element. And I find that a lot of actors, Olivia Wilde is another person with a face like this. Johnny Depp has this too, kind of big metal features, big square, jaw, big square features, where they have this big open space. A lot of actors, not all, of course, right? Actors come in all shapes and sizes, but a lot of actors have these features. And I think how that relates to their life terrain is that when we're telling a story, if you are a good actor, you have to dominate your personality in a sense. You have to bring a dominant thread that maybe isn't necessarily yours. You take on, right? If they're method acting, they take on these roles, they take on these capacity to tell stories very well. There's a domination over your inherent personality that you must adopt. It's almost like an invitation of domination from the outside, an outside character that you're playing. So I see this in actors, and I always wonder about these big dominant bone structures that I see, but they also look good on camera. Typically, people with metallic features usually are found pretty attractive. And because it's a marker of Jing and constitutional strength, this is directly related to things like testosterone. So you can look up the research on men with strong jawlines and prominent cheekbones and prominent wide jaws, this is usually because there's an excess, or not an excess, but a preponderance of high levels of testosterone in the body. So we want to think of hormonal production, Jing, and all of these things related. When we see a big dominant bone structure, subconsciously, I think people, when they look at a face like this, deep down at that instinctual level, we know good genes, good strong constitution, and so usually it's found very attractive. I'm pretty sure a lot of women find Cillian Murphy pretty attractive. He's a good-looking guy. So big dominant bone structure. He's got a nice cut jaw. This is a wood feature. So this has to do with drive, vigor, and energy. He's also, when I was looking at his face, he's also got the death mask. So the death masks I've talked about before. If you haven't seen the video with Alex Honnold, who is the free solo climber, he has a positive iteration of the death mask. Now, when we see the death mask, this is usually characterized by a face that is slightly skeletal in its appearance. The eyes sometimes can have they have a big ocular cavity, right? The bone here, the actual eye socket is large. We'll see a hollowing. The cheeks are so dominant that when the skin comes back, if the person is relatively lean, we'll see this carving into the face, these hollowing of the cheeks, and it gives an overall skeletal-like appearance. Now, with the death mask, what that means is that people with this usually have some kind of strong death instinct wired in. This can take a lot of different shapes. In Alex Honnold's case, it's climbing these insane mountains. People with this, Russell Brand also has this. If you want to check out that face reading, you can go back to my channel, through my channel videos, and see that as well. But the death mask, when we say a strong death instinct, these people can sometimes engage in risky behaviors. In the context of actors and this kind of person, sometimes we see excess drug use and these kinds of things where they're playing with these elements in life that can be risky and can possibly bring death. It's almost like they're walking that edge a little bit. And so when we see the death mask, you want to keep these ideas in mind. There might be a propensity for addiction, there might be a propensity for risk-taking, or it can take the form of people who are sort of shamanistic in their practices, people that are, I would say, in the spiritual health field, where they're doing things like shamanism, or they're having to kind of have one foot in the material world and one foot in that immaterial, intuitive spirit world to a degree. So we can see that manifest a bunch of different ways. I haven't looked, at his background a ton. I try to read people relatively cold, so I'm not trying to connect too many dots. He's also got something called direct peach luck. So there are 5 different peach lucks, and I'll make a video around that in my tutorial sessions around what those are. But he's got direct peach luck. So when they talk about peach luck, the word peach relates to the fruit, obviously, but peaches are seen as prosperous. They are seen as containing a lot of yin. They're juicy. So things that contain a lot of yin are seen as things that will bring life. So the basic philosophy in Eastern philosophy is it's a yin philosophy. It's about moving like water. It's about being receptive and intuitive and paying attention to the subtlety and nuance in life. Chinese medicine is like this, Tai Chi is like this, Qigong is like this, meditation is like this, Feng Shui is like this. It's about subtlety and nuance. So if you have a propensity towards those things, you're going to tune into the yin spectrum of life a bit better. So all of that being said, with the direct peach luck, the peach relates to this lucky component, right? Peach is just attached to that. But when they have sparkling peach luck and they've got, seductive peach luck, but direct peach luck is characterized by a look of stoicism. Oftentimes, not always, the person will sometimes lack fire in their face. And I would say he does. When he smiles, he doesn't get a lot of smile lines. His face doesn't wrinkle up much. That doesn't mean that he's collectively across the board deficient in fire, but I would like to see some wrinkles form up on him as he gets older, because he's in his 40s and he doesn't have a ton of visible wrinkles. But direct peach luck is this sort of stoic look on the face, and these people can be very direct in their delivery, and that's part of their charm, and that's part of what gives them their edge. They can deliver information to friends, family, or tell a story very well with sort of an intensity, and that really has some gravitas in their life. So different types of peach luck, again, but direct peach luck is very much about being blunt. It's about getting to the point. And I think when you watch him act, there is a directness and there's a persuasiveness to the way he acts. There's something very kind of alluring to that. And when people are direct, even as uncomfortable as it can make us, even though it might not land perfectly well, there is something that has a lot of impact. When someone is direct, there's something that we deep down respect because they're not essentially bullshitting us. They're just saying it like it is. And so his face, the countenance of his face and the spirit, how it comes out of his eyes is kind of direct. You can see it in his Batman Begins role when he plays Scarecrow. You can see it on the shows, the actors where he plays, and he's got a very persuasive voice. So that's, that deviates a little bit from face reading, but the tone of voice reflects the spirit in Chinese medicine, the attributes and the integrity, sort of like the structural integrity of the soul is reflected in the tone of voice. And he's got a very interesting voice. So I always kind of take note of that. But again, he's got these very interesting features that all come together. So he's got a lot of metal, which is cold and cool by nature, but also usually very direct. It's contained. The metal's energy is very contained. And so Cillian Murphy, when you look at his face, there is a contained energy to the way his face presents. He's not like Willem Dafoe, that's like really crinkled, or Reese Witherspoon, which has, those faces have a lot of fire. His is very cool, calm, and direct, and that's very metallic. So metallic energy, when we see the metal element show up in people's face, that attribute is definitely there. It's cool, calm, and collected, usually big, wide, open, shiny spaces with not a lot of wrinkling. So he has this. The only thing that I saw here when I was looking at him was a couple of his pictures, his mouth actually looks kind of dry. The mouth is an earth element feature, and he's got pretty full, plump lips, which means things of the five senses are going to be relevant for him. The five senses can also relate to, I found, because it relates to pleasure seeking and expression, an actor with a full mouth technically would be a good thing. That means that, in theory, that's going to serve them. If they have an aptitude for acting, they can sort of dive into the senses to integrate roles, to, portray those roles. But his mouth is a bit dry in some of these images. Now, Chinese medicine, people in the West would say, who cares? So what? He's got some dry lips. What does that really mean? When we look at the face in general, we want yin to be present. That means there's a certain amount of suppleness, even if the face is lean. There's a certain amount of oiliness to the face, even if they're lean. And when we see dryness in the lips, this is usually sort of like a yin deficiency. And yin is the fluid in the body. Yang would be the bioelectricity in our body, the electrical current that charges and moves our central nervous system. So when we see this, when we see the dry lips chronically, there were a few images where I just saw these dry lips. We want to think that yin deficiency can definitely go hand in hand with the death mask. So people that have a death mask and that partake in risky activities, that risk-taking capacity can actually deplete the kidneys. And when the kidneys start to get depleted, the fluid reserves in the body can actually dry up. This is why people that do a lot of skydiving and who are adrenaline junkies can sometimes look withered like a raisin, or people who've done a lot of drugs. Again, I don't know his background with drugs and substance abuse. It's common with actors and people in Hollywood, but with his mouth being a bit dry, I would be pushing him into yin nourishing activities, increasing his healthy fats, also taking up water sports and anything that would give him a bit of stillness. But dietary fat, quality dietary fat would be the place to really start addressing yin deficiency and also not burning the candle from both ends in terms of lifestyle. So his public persona, his natural face, and his inner persona, interesting. I like that his natural face and his inner persona are very closely related. His public persona is definitely a bit more broad. This is favorable. The broader and the wider one side of the face is, in this context, the public persona, that is favorable if you're going to be on stage. Bigger and broader and wider is always more accessible and more approachable. So for an actor to have a wider right side, that's favorable, especially in the context of his work. His inner persona is a lot more yang. It's narrower. It's a bit more wood, a little bit more general. He looks intense. And I would argue, I would guess, again, I've never gotten into a conversation with him. He's a hell of an actor. I would love to talk to him, but his inner persona looks direct and calm, cool, and collected. That would be my assessment. And the idea is, when you do a face reading and you're reading people, it's like, okay, cool, you've established that. So what does that mean for him in terms of lifestyle and living? I would have to assess and check him out and talk to him. Face reading is very much an interactive, co-creative process. But if a person is calm, cool, and collected internally, they need to play to that consistently across the board in a lot of their interactions and not be overly bubbly and overly, excitable. And, if Cillian Murphy was being pushed to be excitable and, kind of like bubbly by his publicist or something, I would be the guy saying, don't do that. Really play that calm, cool, collected card. as long as that really is how your inner terrain is. But, I would have to assess and check and, read his other elements. Again, sometimes the face can be elusive. The human being, the soul of a human is very complex, and sometimes features aren't always exactly on point. So you have to kind of find what the face is saying, how are they actually living, and then how much energy is that yielding. This is why you have to explore and talk to people. So that's my reading on Cillian Murphy. If there's someone else you'd like me to read, please let me know. Thanks for tuning in, as always.